Good evening. Well, just like Cole ran into Sunday, Jeff was treading pretty close to my devotional this evening. So, that's okay. Some of the things we talked about earlier tonight in our class will apply to what we're going to talk about this evening in the devotional. If you would be taking your Bibles out and turn to the 119th Psalm. We'll be reading a little bit from that here in just a minute. You know, each day we go about our day living our life on this earth, and there's a lot of concerns that go with life on this earth. You know, we take care of the needs of ourselves and of our family, and God expects us to. That's not something that we shouldn't be doing. He expects us to take care of those needs. You know, whether it's going to work, making meals, taking care of the houses that we live in, perhaps going to school if you're still in that age. These things are all necessary. You think about how much time we spend each week just surviving, just taking care of the things of this life. Then you've got time spent in recreation, entertainment, things like that. And that's okay too. There's a lot of things that wraps up our time in this life. And it's very easy to get caught up in all these things. We seem to be so busy, the society that we live in today. We try to cram so much into 24 hours. Sometimes I think that maybe the Lord suffers a little bit because we spend so much time taking care of these things that we deemed as necessary. And it is easy for us to get caught up and maybe lose track of what's really important. I think we oftentimes look at many of the luxuries in this life and we think of them as necessities. And sometimes it's hard we get so comfortable with them, so used to them, that we forget they are, in fact, luxuries. And I think most of us would admit that we could spend a little more time in our Bible studying. I know I could spend more time in it. And we can set that as a goal. To do that, set that as a priority in our life, to spend more time reading our Bible. That's something that we're capable of doing. But what about the thought of taking more time just to meditate on God? And sometimes that word meditation is thrown around and we don't really know, well, does that mean some kind of a Buddhist monk sitting somewhere meditating is maybe perhaps what we think of, but that's not it. We're told throughout the New Testament, throughout the Bible, that we should spend time in meditation. Maybe you're not reading a particular verse, but are you thinking about other verses that you've read? Are you thinking about what God intends for you to do in your life? Are you thinking about His plan for you specifically? Are you thinking about His law and how it affects perhaps the way you're living your life? And are you in compliance? Do you just spend time thinking about that? Do we forget sometimes, because we're so busy, to just spend time thinking about God? It's very easy in the place we live to look around at His creation and be in awe at what He has made. But I think we can still find ourselves sometimes forgetting to think about God. I'd pose that question to you. I'm not looking for anyone to raise their hands, but have you spent any time since you were here on Sunday thinking about God? I hope your days, Monday and Tuesday, and the day today wasn't so busy that you forgot to think about God between Sunday and now. We're going to read a little bit in Psalm 119. This one's not titled, and many of them are titled as to who the writer was. Most of the psalm were written by David. And I think it's fair to say that David probably has a better grasp on who God is than any of us do. David, when you read through the Psalms, he had a very good grasp on who God was, what God was capable of. And you could spend a lot of time in Psalms making yourself better acquainted with who God is. I'd like to read a little bit here in Psalm 119. Let's begin in verse 97. We'll read through that part. The writer of the psalm here says, "Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all the day. You, through your commandments, make me wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. I have more understanding than all my teachers, for your testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the ancients, because I keep your precepts. I have restrained my feet from every evil way, that I may keep your word. I have not departed from your judgments, for you yourself have taught me. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Through your precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way. We'll stop there for a moment. As we spend time thinking about the Bible, when we spend time thinking about God, do we have this same feeling that the psalmist has here? You can tell in these verses how much he appreciates God and he appreciates God's law. You know, many in the world today look at the Bible as a book, a list of restrictions. Well, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And really what the Bible is a book full of protection. If you live this way, you'll be protected from all the things that you're going to encounter in this life. And there are some negative things that we will all face at times in this life. And the words in this book will protect us. They may not stop bad things from happening, but it will give us the tools that we need to carry on through those events. When we think about David, and assuming David was the writer of this psalm, think of the bad events that happened in his life. There were quite a few. Yet he still was able to think about God. He says, your law, oh how I love your law, it is my meditation all day. And if we could have that attitude, think how much better our day would go when we get caught up in worrying about the things of this life. Can we truly say that we enjoy God's law and we spend time thinking about it, like the psalmist talks about here? Or do we spend each moment worrying about the things of this life, which sadly is often the case? Let's back up a little bit here, still in Psalm 119, but let's go back to verses 14 through 16. It says, I have rejoiced in the way of your testimonies, as much as in all riches. I will meditate on your precepts and contemplate your ways. I will delight myself in your statutes. I will not forget your word. How important is that last statement? I will not forget your word. Often when we get caught up in the worries and the cares of this life, it's because we've forgotten his word. We've forgotten the things that he's told us. We have all the tools to function in this life, but we forget them, and then we get caught up and worried about the things in this life. Spending the time that we should to read and know God's law, to meditate on God's words, to meditate on who God is, have a true understanding of it so that we can enjoy it, like the psalmist talks about, enjoying his words. Sweeter than honey, he said. That will allow us to put our priorities in perspective. And this is what Jeff talked about a little bit in the class. In contrast to the cares of this life, think about how Paul had a good understanding of what the psalmist was talking about here and how he viewed this life. Let's go ahead and turn back to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. When we think about how Paul saw his earthly life, and we know he was ready to leave this earth, but as he stated, it was more important that he stay and continue the work. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, let's begin in verse 1. For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed with our habitation which is from heaven. If indeed, having been clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but further clothed, that mortality may be swallowed up by life. Now he who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who also has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. So we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we're absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, yes, well pleased, rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Now, Paul doesn't speak extremely plainly there, at least not in the way we speak today. But when you really break down the things that he's saying, he's talking about how much greater it will be to leave this body behind, which is what we were talking about in our class this evening. If we have the true understanding of God's will for us, if we have the true understanding of His Word, if we spend time meditating on Him, the attitude that Paul has here will come to us readily, where not that we necessarily wish to die, but we look forward to what comes when it happens. To be freed from this earthly body, to be at home with God. We surround ourselves with the comforts of this life, and how often does that make us stumble? We make ourselves so comfortable here that maybe we don't want to leave. We're so busy here worrying about those comforts that then we fail to, and we lose sight of our goal. We fail to spend the time thinking about God and meditating on Him and His Word. Don't think that Satan doesn't take advantage of that busyness. We've talked about that in classes before, how Satan takes advantage of us being busy doing even good things. We can be so busy doing good things we haven't picked up our Bible since Sunday when we left here. And maybe we don't pick it up again until next Sunday when we come back. Not necessarily doing anything evil, just busy. Let's go ahead and drop down and read verses 9 and 10. 2 Corinthians 5, verses 9 and 10. Therefore we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well-pleasing to Him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. We know that each of us are going to answer for the things that we do in this life. How many of us want to stand before the Lord and say, I was just so busy, I didn't take the time to see what you wanted me to do. I didn't spend the time thinking about you, even though you are the Creator. Let's go to Philippians 4 and verse 8, and then we'll close this evening. When we think about meditating on Scripture, meditating on the Lord, Paul talks about it directly here to the Philippians. He says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. That was kind of the point of the devotional this evening. Let's make sure that we're taking the time that we should to just think about God, think about His law, think about what He has done for you. Draw yourself closer to Him. As we saw in 2 Corinthians 5, we're going to answer for the things we do. Things, our actions, our words, our thoughts, we will answer for those. And how much better would it be to stand before Him and Him praise you for the amount of time that you spent thinking about Him and honoring Him like we should. So as we do each time we close, if there's anyone that has a need that the brethren can help them with, whether they need to take the steps to become a Christian or whether you need the prayers of the brethren, whatever your needs would be, please come to the front as we stand and sing.